find myself often in these situations where I realize that words are funny, man. They're so finite and fixed in what they are that they don't usually do justice to the actual human experience. I mean, they're useful. They have a function that they allow us to communicate more efficiently. And pick the number, right? 90% of the time, it's good. It works. It covers what we need. But when you really get deep, when you really get into the complexity, the nuance, the reality of what life is, they often don't. Even simple words like pain. Pain intuitively is very easy to understand. We can use it in everyday conversation. Everybody would be very well versed and understand what's being discussed and what's happening. But in kind of that annoying philosophical way, when you really kind of dissect the word and say, like, well, what does it really mean? And how would I actually define it? You start to see the limitations of words. And I think that's why so many philosophers, like I've been reading a lot of Kant lately, the critique of pure reason, I'm only a little bit through it in the beginning, but you see these philosophers that are just dissecting concepts and just, what is reason and aesthetics and transcendental aesthetics and, cognition versus intuition versus sensibility and trying to like logically prove out, well, this and that. And sometimes you wonder, like, what the fuck is that for? But I think, going back to pain as a concept, as a word, is an example of that. Because if you ask me just real quick, gun to my head, just tell me what pain is. Pain is a discomfort that our body doesn't want, right? Something negative that impacts us, that makes us feel discomfort. But it's interesting because the more conversations I have with people, talking on the podcast in different places, you hear the functionality of pain, of discomfort, of how useful it can be, how we learn from it, we grow from it, how, there's this belief that any pain, any suffering is an opportunity to learn and grow. It's something that's going to lead us to a better place. And it starts to make you wonder in the spirit of like that philosophical analysis, well, then what actually is pain? If pain is ultimately a good thing, like, how does that reconcile with this preconceived or working notion that we have that pain is negative, that suffering is negative? Because on a very base level, that would seem to make sense, right? If I break my arm right now, I'm going to feel pain, and it's because my body's telling me something's wrong, right? If I get a virus, I'm going to feel discomfort. I'm going to feel pain and suffering because my body's trying to tell me there's something wrong here. So it would seem like, at the essence, pain is that. Discomfort is something that we shouldn't experience. Yet we do grow from it. And so I think that's why I started where I started with words, because it's often the case. Like the words are accurate. They're the right words, but they just don't convey the full completeness of the sensations, the concepts, the ideas that we're talking about. Because to think of pain as just something that's uncomfortable, discomfort, something we want to get rid of, it's negative, it's not complete enough. It tells part of the story, but not the whole story. And it's very tricky to think about, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Right? And the same thing can be said of happiness. You hear people say this often about happiness. If we were just happy all the time, that would be a problem. Life would be boring. And it's such a weird thing, because happiness, much like pain, the kind of quick working definition of that is usually like it's a positive. It's a good thing. Happiness is something we want. But even that, we can kind of find a way to say, actually, it's not. So I don't know if the problem is with the words. Maybe we're using pain and happiness wrong. Maybe it's the concepts we're trying to explain. But it just seems insufficient. It seems like they maybe, again, 90% of the time they're great, everyday conversation, awesome, cool. But when we're really trying to understand life, understand ourselves, understand the complexity that is the world we live in and the experiences we have, they're doing us a disservice. Because it doesn't, we hang too much. We put too much weight on these words rather than actually understanding what are we really trying to say. And I think there's something to be said for really probing down to the root and getting past that superficial level of like, well, life is suffering or pain helps us grow. Well, what do we mean? Pain help? What is pain exactly? And what do we mean it helps us grow? Does it really? It very well might, but I think trying to get into these discussions at a much deeper level, beyond what the words will typically allow us to do, is important. And you say, well, how do you do that? How do we communicate if not with words? And it's true. I mean, certainly there's some other things you could do, but I think words are still our only language, is our tool. We just have to account for its deficiencies. We have to account for the fact that a word can mean many different things. It can have various different dynamics to it. So when you're in a conversation, when you're talking about, that 10%, where you're really getting into some deep, complex philosophical things, I think it's important to ask more questions, to press and challenge. What does that actually mean? And if that means that, does it actually mean this? I think that type of exercise is really important. And then we can start to understand things like pain, discomfort, suffering, happiness, joy at a much deeper, more accurate level than we've allowed ourselves to at this point. Something interesting to think about.